Well, Mr. Cooke, yeah, the last time that you were interviewed on Wake Up TV to talk about the county budget, you talked about reductions and doing more with less. That was about a year ago, and a lot has changed. Can you just tell us what's been going on with the local economy since the last time you talked about the county budget?
Well, I think for the last 3 years we've been talking about reductions in county services, having to do more with less, and that was because our revenues had been declining. And so since 2009, our revenues for the county have been going in a downward, we'll call it a spiral, but they've been going downward. And for the first time since 2009, they seem to have leveled off or bottomed out. And so for the upcoming year, we're seeing a little more positive signs in the economy, and that's primarily because of the sales tax revenue. I think it's going to be a little higher this year than it was last year, and it'll be a little higher next year, we project, than it is this year. So for the first time, sales taxes seem to turn around, and property tax, even though the growth is a little bit more than last year, it's still slow, but again, we'll see some growth on the property tax side too.
The fiscal year 2012 budget, like each budget, had some challenges. Tell us about those challenges that were unique to Wake County as you prepared the fiscal year 2012 recommended budget.
Well, Eric, I think a few things come to mind. The first are that we knew that we had to open some facilities next year that would add expenses to the budget. And the two that we highlight are the jail expansion that will be open next spring. And it's a fairly sizable expansion, and also we're moving a lot of functions down to that facility off of Hammond Road. And so it has a fairly large impact on the budget. It's somewhere around $3.5 million. The other large increase is in the area of mental health services in our Wake Brook facility, in that we have a contract with a vendor that'll begin this summer to provide 16 beds, facility-based crisis and secure detox beds at Wake Brook, and that adds another little over $2 million to the budget. And so when revenues aren't growing and you have to incur additional expenses for new facilities, we had to look to the rest of the county budget and make some reductions. And so there are reductions made throughout county government in order to accommodate opening those new facilities, as well as some other things. But again, as we talked about in the budget, since the budget is about the same size it was last year, if we're going to have to incur those new expenses, then cuts had to be made. The other thing that's new in the budget this year that hasn't been there over the last couple, and that's pay raise for county employees, and county employees who have, shouldered the recession and the cuts that have been made over the last couple of years are doing more with less, and I think as many organizations throughout the county are. And this is the first year that there'll be a modest pay increase in the budget for county employees.
The Wake County Public School System always seems to draw a lot of public attention. This year there were one of a few areas that saw increased funding. Can you explain how this will work?
Well, this does require some explanation, because basically the funding for the school system is staying flat. We've maintained their current appropriation, which is $313.5 million. And again, over the last 3 years, we have maintained the funding for the school system. So while most other agencies and departments have seen reductions, we've kept the funding for the schools flat, and I think that reflects the priorities that the school system has in our budget. Now, having said that, their total number is going up, and so and the way we're doing that is there are services that we provide in human services. The two that we talk about in the budget are ready-to-learn centers and 4-H school-based services. They have traditionally been paid for out of the county's human services budget. We are giving that money to the school system. That's what allows their appropriation to go up. And the discussion we've had with the school system, if they want to continue to pay for ready-to-learn centers and 4-H school-based services, then they would contract with the county to do so. If they wanted to reallocate those monies to higher priorities as they deem, then they have the ability to do that. And so with this new appropriation, which is $900,000 larger than the current year, what it does, it essentially allows them to move that money if they want to, or to continue to provide those services.
Human Services provides a number of community resources and programs for those in the community, from child and family services to mental health and substance abuse services to affordable housing programs. The budget for this department is going to be changing a good deal next year. Can you tell us about the recommended changes?
Well, I think as we use the analogy in the budget of a roller coaster ride, I think that's most exemplified in the Human Services budget. There are a lot of things that are going up and a lot of things that are going down, and the net result is a decline in the Human Services budget. But let me do the upside first. The upside is we're doing the contract for Wake Brook. We're also adding funds to Human Services for the Holly Hill contract for mental health beds, and we're also doing a Medicaid partnership with Wake Med. So that's on the upside. On the downside, there's a lot of changes in federal and state revenues, which will take the Human Services budget down. There's also reductions we're making in child daycare and reductions that we're making in some of the foster care programs.
There are some changes that citizens probably should be aware of when it relates to the Emergency Medical Services Department. Can you explain?
Sure, I'm glad you asked me about that. If you look at the budget for Emergency Medical Services, or EMS, that's going up in large fashion. It's going to go up by a little over $8 million. That really doesn't mean we're adding $8 million in new resources to the budget. It simply reflects a couple things that are going on in the upcoming year. One have been mergers of two, which at one time had been not-for-profit rescue squads. So the merger of Apex and the Six Forks EMS into Wake County EMS takes place in the upcoming budget, which adds both revenue and expense to the budget. The other thing it includes is centralizing EMS billings, which up until this time have been done separately by Wake EMS and separately by the not-for-profits. We're centralizing the billing so we can take advantage of one thing, being able to get Medicaid reimbursement, and that's a benefit to the county and the taxpayers because it allows us to get reimbursed for Medicaid as opposed to using taxpayer money for the subsidy.
There are some other expansions in the fiscal year 2012 budget as the county looks to provide the best possible services to residents. Can you tell us about those?
Well, there's not that many, and again, the ones that we highlighted were the new facilities that we have to open. That took a lot of, actually that takes a lot of the additional funds that we've put in the budget. The Wake Brook contract, the Holly Hill contract, and then the other that comes to mind are investigators in our City County Bureau of Identification. These are the folks that do crime scene investigations, and if we make that function a little bit more efficient, it also makes the entire law enforcement service provision in the county more efficient as well.
There were also some capital projects in the fiscal year 2012 budget. Can you explain some of those?
Well, this is capital. We have actually, squeezed the capital over the last few years. We're fortunate in that we have bid and financed two big projects. I think everybody's aware of those, the jail and the courthouse. And so I think our timing on that has been pretty good. We've tried to squeeze most of the rest of the capital budget, but we do emphasize maintaining the facilities that we have. And so there are funds in the capital budget to continue to do that, and that's a high priority for the county. There's also a recommendation in the budget that actually moves some money from the capital budget to the operating budget. We dedicate a portion of the property tax rate to the capital and debt program, and since we have squeezed the capital program over the last few years, we've shifted some money to the operating budget. We've now done it. This upcoming budget will be the third year in a row, and so we're formalizing what we've done by reducing the property tax rate dedicated to the capital program, and that's also a recommendation in the upcoming budget.
There's been a lot of information that's been shared in this interview. Can you recap the most important information to viewers?
I think, as we mentioned, a lot of ups and downs along the way, although if you look at this year's budget, which was $951.2 million, next year's budget, which is $951.5 million, is really not much of a change. It's essentially $300,000 over a $950 million budget. So it's essentially the same budget that we have this year from a total dollar standpoint, but there's a lot of ups and downs along the way. On the upside, we're opening new facilities, the jail, Wake Brook second floor. We have some expansion items, like we mentioned, the City County Bureau of Identification. And on the downside, there's many cuts in all different departments and agencies and not-for-profits that do business with the county. And so when you look at the total budget, it doesn't look like much has changed. But if you look at all the moving parts along the way, a lot has moved in an upward direction and more has moved in a downward direction.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Eric.